Jeremy Swayman will not be in attendance at Boston Bruins training camp as on-ice activities get underway. But who's more to blame here, the player or Boston Bruins management?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, September 19th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. All right, so Bruins training camp began on Wednesday, and the players gathered for some photos, media day, stuff like that. But the highlight of the day was opening remarks from general manager Don Sweeney and head coach Jim Montgomery. And after Sweeney opened by giving his heartfelt condolences to the Gaudreau family and congratulating Judd Surratt and Ryan Johnston for being added to the broadcast teams, he announced that Jeremy Swayman will not be in attendance today on the ice. He has chosen to wait, and rightfully so, Sweeney added, until a contract is settled. He continued, quote, "It's our intention to continue to negotiate a contract. I'm disappointed when you set things as a priority in the general manager spot. You do your best to try and accomplish that, and I haven't been able to do that yet. But I will make everybody aware that some of the inconsistencies that have been reported are completely inaccurate. And I think that being representative of the Bruins, how we do business, and try to keep things close to the vest and respect everybody's own privacy." He said he wasn't going to go into depth of negotiations, but he's excited about the players they do have there. And he did add some interesting things about the Jeremy Swayman contract situation, but he was certainly somewhat frustrated about certain inaccuracies out there about the process. And of course, that Jeremy Swayman is not yet at training camp. And it's super easy to put the blame on Don Sweeney. You know, everybody is at training camp. Everybody's ready to put on their skates, get on the ice, and get down to work. Whereas, to steal a line from Batman, Jeremy Swayman is at home washing his tights. It's so easy to say, just pay the man, get this done. You traded Linus Ullmark. You should have had a deal in place right from the get-go. But to steal another line from a great movie, it takes more than two to tango or something like that, according to Billy Madison. Don Sweeney did say it's not unlike David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Brandon Carlo, who started camp without contracts previously, or did not start camp without contracts. It's a process. Every year there's a few players that are without contracts coming to camp. This year the Bruins just happened to have one. He said that it's been reported that the Bruins have been incommunicative, and that's far from the truth, Sweeney said. You'd be hard-pressed to find a person, a GM in the league, or anybody that would go 3 weeks not returning a phone call. That's what he said. So again, constant communication, dialogue, finding common ground. That was the case in all three of the previous players I mentioned, McAvoy, Pastrnak, Carlo, and the goal here is to negotiate a deal, not in an arbitration setting. Now, it's of course been reported as well that maybe Swayman is asking for the moon. Maybe the Bruins are coming in on a term and a contract valuation that's much lower than what Jeremy Swayman believes he deserves or what he should be paid. It's been reported that the Bruins have offered him in the $6.5 million range, which would be along the same lines as what John Gibson is making and not what stars like Ilya Sorokin, Connor Hellebuck are making. That's the range that Swayman wants to be in. So it takes two to tango, and it's not just Don Sweeney's fault. We'll discuss Jeremy Swayman's role in all this coming up later in the podcast. What is Don Sweeney's responsibility, though, is to put the best possible team on the ice. And he basically said that the reason they traded Linus Ullmark is because both goalies, both Ullmark and Swayman, said they wanted to play 55 games next year. And that's virtually impossible on the same team. Both goalies were not discontent, but wanted to be number ones. So they had to make a decision to go in the direction of the trade where they brought in another goaltender. They feel confident in Brandon Bussi. Training camp is going to be a very good opportunity for Bussi and Korpisalo to work with goalie Bob for as long as Jeremy is out. But both goalies, again, wanted to be the man, and they can't in a tandem situation. He called the reports out there great entertainment, but at the end of the day, there's not a lot of fact checking going on. And a lot of us are in it for the juice to go for, what is most salacious out there. Don Sweeney's not returning phone calls. Jeremy Swayman is asking for $10 million. It's a done deal. There's a deal happening right before training camp begins. Yes, some of the blame belongs on Don Sweeney. It's his job to put together the best possible team. And you can argue that coming into training camp with a potential tandem of Korpisalo and Bussi versus last season when you had Ullmark and Swayman is potentially disastrous. I had a lot of people on social media last night saying, well, it's the Bruins. They're strong defensively. They'll get through. You can put anybody in net and they'll be fine. That's not necessarily true. The Bruins were regularly outshot last season, and they were successful because they had one of the top save percentages in the NHL by team. Third ranked, I believe, behind Winnipeg and Florida. Hellebuck, Bobrovsky. Then you had Ullmark, Swayman. You can't expect to go from that tandem to this tandem and not have some regression there in terms of save percentage. It's a different, even from the guys playing in front of them, two different goalies with two different tendencies, two different approaches. It throws everybody off, and it takes some time to get things going. Look back at Linus Ullmark. It took him some time to get acclimated to the Bruins system. So while I don't necessarily blame Don Sweeney for the Jeremy Swayman contract stalemate, you can certainly fault him for not really having that great of a contingency plan here, or for not getting Swayman signed before trading Linus Ullmark. Yes, there was his the date of July 1st where he could tweak his no trade clause. They wanted to get into the first round of the draft. That's why they rushed it and did it prior to the end of the Stanley Cup final. But being on the hook for $3 million of Joonas Korpisalo for 4 more years without really knowing if he still has some gas in the tank to be a starter, and relying on a guy with 0 NHL games of experience, you can fault Don Sweeney for not having that contingency plan and for not having a deal in place prior to that. But of course, it does take two to tango, and Jeremy Swayman is on the hook for this as well. He deserves some of the blame, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Football season is well underway, and FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they're giving something a little different for you over the next few days. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So go to FanDuel, put $5 down on the over-under for Boston Bruins points, which is set, I believe, at 97.5. And you can get that 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, and check out the Locked On NHL podcast next as well. All right, so part of the blame certainly goes on the shoulders of Don Sweeney here. And what's happening? My computer is freezing. Don Sweeney certainly deserves part of the blame here for not getting Jeremy Swayman signed and in attendance at training camp. But at the same time, Jeremy Swayman is digging in and believing in his worth. Elliot Friedman reported earlier this week that he believes there was an 8-year deal on the table, but it was in the 6s. And that's not close to what Jeremy Swayman is looking for. You heard from Swayman earlier this month or last month, and he said, when you're not being compensated for your endless efforts and doing what you do best, it's a nerve-wracking feeling because it's your family and what you're fighting for. So after educating himself and getting a better understanding of the business side of it all, it's given him a new mindset of understanding the business and how to react to it. He understands the cap is going up and where it will be in years. He understands his comparables and how he can't ruin the goalie market for guys that are going to be in his shoes down the line. So he sees Ilya Sorokin getting an $8.25 million contract. Sorokin's 4 years older than him. Sorokin has the exact same save percentage as him career-wise, albeit in 60 more appearances. Sorokin has had more of the lion's share of starts over his backup, Semyon Varlamov. And he also has a Vezina finalist nod to his name. Swayman, on the other hand, has won. He won a playoff round, almost pushed the Florida Panthers to 7 games, and has a Jennings Trophy to his name, where he, along with Ullmark, earned the best save percentage in the NHL. So there's similarities there. And you look at the cap going up, and you think Swayman's going to take $6.5 million when Igor Shesterkin, who can be an unrestricted free agent next summer, is going to be making maybe double that. I don't think so. You have to see his perspective and see that the cap's going up. So even if they were to sign him at $8.5 million for 8 years through his prime years, that is more than likely going to be a steal. And I understand the Bruins are saying he hasn't ran with the ball yet. He hasn't proven to be a number 1 starter where he's getting that 55 starts per season. We want to make sure he can still play at the same level with that heavier workload. But Swayman's done everything he can to prove that he is able to do that. And in the most pressure situations, he made every start but one in the playoffs this past season and was extraordinary in those high pressure situations. Yes, it's a small sample size, but it shows you his mentality, his mindset, and where he can be. So yes, you can put the blame on Jeremy Swayman as well for sticking to his guns and believing in his worth. Sweeney deserves a lot of the blame too for perhaps undervaluing him or wanting to keep the cap hit as low as possible. But from a team perspective, you can't fault him for that either. His job is to put together the best possible team, and the lower you can keep individual player salaries, the better you can spend, or the more you can spend to put a team around these core guys. And you can't really say they're not willing to pay, because they've paid Charlie McAvoy, made him one of the highest paid defensemen in the NHL. David Pasternak's rightly one of the highest paid forwards in the NHL. But they had achieved a bit more up to that point in their careers. So Swayman sticking to his guns. It's no fault of his own that he hasn't had that number one job. And he very well deserves it and should be able to excel with it. But there's that question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You show me you can do it, and then I pay you, or I pay you, and then you live up to that contract. That's kind of where we are at now. And in that philosophical debate of chicken and the egg, who do you blame? It's a bit of both there. And there's two things working against these guys at the moment. So that's where the Bruins are. No Jeremy Swayman. 100% inaccurate that negotiations have ended, but also 100% inaccurate that there was a deal that was imminent. Also inaccurate to say that Don Sweeney wasn't returning their calls. And it's all part of the business nowadays, these reports, these rumors out there. But at the end of the day, the pressure is on the GM to put together the best possible team. And he's had the challenge of losing some iconic players recently. He says he wakes up every day. It's how he's wired. And his goal is to put together the best possible team. You could argue that he's done a fantastic job building a Bruins team that's a consistent winner in the regular season. You can also argue he's failed because they have not won a Stanley Cup. And the criticisms of Sweeney go back to the 2015 draft. One of his wins on the draft was scooping Jeremy Swayman in the 4th round. And this group should be motivated, he said. It should be exciting. And there's no reason for this Swayman drama to take away from what should be a very exciting Boston Bruins season. About Joonas Korpisalo, he did say the body of work is there. He talked to Rob Blake in LA. He was sought after by the Kings. He did a good job playing in Columbus, and it's not dissimilar to what the process was bringing Yaroslav Halak in a few years ago. Some of the areas they felt he could improve, and he did great as well. So they're confident that he will get back to being a good goaltender, and you saw that in LA and certainly in stints in Columbus. But Bussy, Korpisalo to open the season, they both have to prove it. But going from Ullmark, Swayman to Bussy, Korpisalo, that you can put on Don Sweeney, and that is indeed a bit of a failure, to be sure. So who's to blame? Both parties take some of the blame. I put a poll on the Locked On NHL Bruins Twitter account this morning. Who's to blame for there not being a contract yet? And small sample size, but it's pretty split right now. 51% in favor of Swayman and his agent, 49% voting for the Bruins and Don Sweeney. So there's no simple answer here, and hopefully they can get things solidified. We heard from Jim Montgomery earlier saying that they try to get their vets in the latter part of the exhibition. Some younger guys get in the earlier parts. So hopefully he can get signed and appear in 1-2 exhibition games before the season opener against the Florida Panthers on October 8th. What else did we learn from Sweeney and Jim Montgomery on Wednesday? We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Gametime is the best ticketing app out there. It's just undeniable. I've used it several times to buy tickets for baseball games, hockey games, concerts, And they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the view from your seat. You can get a panoramic view on the app so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, but create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Gametime. What time is it? It's game time, folks. Download it today and get in on the action. Jeremy Swayman wasn't the only topic of conversation at Boston Bruins media availability on Wednesday, and he's not the only person looking for a contract extension. It's not lost on people that head coach Jim Montgomery is in the final year of his 3-year contract. And he was asked about a lack of a contract extension. He said it wouldn't affect him. He loves being a Bruin. He's very fortunate to be head coach of the Boston Bruins, and his focus when he is Bruins coach is staying in the present and just getting better every day. It sounds cliche, but he can't allow himself to think about the future because he'd be a little bit of a hypocrite. He's asking the players to always stay in the moment, so he too has to stay in the moment. So that's the way he's looking at things. Doesn't matter if he has an 8-year contract or a 1-day contract. That's the way he's proceeding, and that's his process. They're hoping for a dominant physical offensive team, and they're going to see how that grows, how people relish their roles, who thrives in certain positions, hanging on to the puck more, spending more time in the offensive zone. For our liking, we spent too much time in the D zone, he said, and not enough time in the O zone last year as a team. That's especially true if Korpisalo and Bussy are going to be your opening tandem. Like I said, you look at the underlying numbers last year, the Bruins were regularly outshot, out-attempted. Yes, they limited the opposition in terms of high danger chances, but still, you can't bank on some of those out chances not finding their way through. You look at Korpisalo last year in Ottawa, there was certainly some leakiness, especially early on in games that put the Ottawa Senators behind the 8 ball. And that's something that needs to be rectified. The power play as well. They're hoping Lindholm is a trigger man wherever he ends up playing, probably in the bumper position, but maybe not. You get a real smart hockey player there that makes a lot of plays, more face-off wins, better in zone play, better entrances. So all facets of the power play should be improved with Lindholm in the mix. He wasn't having anything to do with the Swayman talk, just focusing again on the present, who's there, what he has to work with, and kind of moving forward with that. He is confident that the goalie situation is all right without him. You look at 22 years of goalie Bob's history, and it's pretty special. That can't be denied either. And yeah, he does deserve the benefit of the doubt when it comes to working with Korpisalo and Bussy. Bussy has the ability to make some big-time saves. They've seen that in Providence. In the exhibition schedule last season, second, third effort. So they have confidence in him coming in. Other notes, Matt Poitras, fully healthy, ready to go to begin. There's a lot of expectations on Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov. The Bruins want to be a puck possession team. They're a team that wants to win one-on-one battles, and those are areas where perhaps those two have struggled. So that's going to be something that they're going to be looking at in camp. He's hoping to have a better camp than last year. Last year was good, but with all the turnover they've had, 2 years in a row they've had a lot of turnover. It's kind of a fresh start for a lot of guys, and there's going to be some guys like Trent Frederick, Morgan Geekie taking on more roles. McAvoy, Pasternak, Marshy, Coyle will be expected to lead the way. And Nikita Zadorov, Lindholm coming in hot and ready to contribute. So that was pretty much all we learned from the Bruins yesterday. Of course, the big deal was Jeremy Swayman. Obviously, the deadline to get a deal done is December 1st. That's the ultimate deadline, because if he's not signed by then, he can't play this season. But going that far into the season, you regularly see it, that if teams are outside of the playoff picture at Thanksgiving, then it's very hard to get back in, especially with the 3-point game here in today's NHL. They're confident that Bussy and Korpisalo can carry the load in Swayman's absence, but ideally you're getting Swayman signed here sooner than later, because that's just it. The other note, Tyler Johnson, Sweeney said he brings versatility, experience, winning pedigree, production, skating component is still there. They identified early on, and they weren't trying to be disrespectful to Tyler and his representatives, that they weren't in a position to offer a contract, but they'd be excited to have him part of the group. And he felt the opportunity was there in a bona fide manner, how it's presented, and they're excited to help. So they have the cap space to sign him, obviously, but with Jeremy Swayman still yet unsigned, they had to go the PTO route. But they're hoping, looks like, that he will be part of the team in some way. Sweeney did mention the contract for Montgomery. He said there have been talks, but they're going to keep that between them, similar to what Brad Marchand said about not wanting to talk about the contract publicly, which goes against Jeremy Swayman and what he has been pretty open about saying about being more educated and the like. So that's pretty much where we stand here as training camp begins. We've got players on the ice here this morning. Don Sweeney's feeling some pressure to win, to put the best team. They played well last season, exceeded expectations in my mind. And we'll kind of talk about expectations for this team tomorrow as we assess the Locked On NHL Power Rankings, the over-under for points for this team, and just really assess what the expectations are. That's it for today's episode, though. Thank you so much for taking some time to listen, friends. I hope you're all having a great week. Please do take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.